I spent about a week just doing everything my review course told me to do, which is just watching the video lectures, trying to take all the questions, getting the questions wrong or not really knowing why the questions were wrong, and then going back to the lectures and trying to figure out why they were wrong. And it would take me an entire day just to get through one little module.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this is probably going to take a lot of time and energy just to get through, one chapter, and I need some guidance. And
Welcome to another episode of the CPA Exam Experience Podcast. I'm Logan, and in today's episode, you're going to hear Nate and I talk to Josh. So Josh was one of the few people who, instead of struggling for months and years potentially using the normal approach, he only used it for about 2 weeks before he was like, I've got to change something. So he switched to SuperfastCPA strategies only about 2 weeks in. He started studying when he started grad school, and it was taking him all day just to finish one module. And that's why he was so willing to switch to SuperfastCPA so soon. Something that I think will be really helpful to listen for in this interview is he said one of the biggest mental shifts he had to have was being okay with getting questions wrong when he was going through them for the first time. Remember, this approach is not about getting the questions right the first time. It's all about learning from the questions as your learning tool. Josh has some great tips, so I hope you like the interview. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to give another reminder about the free webinar training we have on SuperfastCPA.com. It's only 1 hour long, it's free, and we teach the 6 key ingredients to passing the CPA exam. It's 1 hour of training that will save you months and months of struggling. With that said, let's go straight into the interview with Josh.
Let's go back to that year you were talking about before using SuperfastCPA. What were your big struggles you were running into with the study process?
yeah, so well, full disclosure, I think I only attempted to study for a couple of weeks outside of the super fast CPA method before
Okay.
I started using materials. And at this point, I had gotten so many ads for it, so many ads for super fast and the link to the free training and the free webinar. And so I was like, what the heck? Let me try this training and see what happens. And so I listened to it, and it was just amazing. Just the study tips that you gave in that free training of approaching the questions first and working backwards and kind of just restructuring the way you study. And when I had heard that, I was just like, wow, okay. I mean, this, when you say it out loud, it sounds, like common sense, but
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but it's something that I didn't really think about. And so I spent maybe a couple of weeks. I had just started grad school. I had finished an internship, got a full-time offer with that internship, and they paid for my review course. And I started grad school in August of 2021, and that's when I started studying for it. And I spent about a week just doing everything my review course told me to do, which is just um, watching the video lectures, you know, trying to take all the questions, getting the questions wrong or not really knowing why the questions were wrong, and then going back to the lectures and trying to figure out why they were wrong. And it would take me an entire day just to get through one little module.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this is probably going to take a lot of time and energy just to get through, one chapter, and I need some guidance. And so, yeah, just kind of took a leap of faith and just seeing like, what else is there? What study tips are out there? And you were one of the first people that I ran across, and yeah, the rest was history.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So to get into specifics, you kind of mentioned the questions first, but once you started using our study methods and or study tools, what were the most helpful things about Superfast CPA to you in your process?
Definitely. the idea of the fact that you can be able to have a short study session and still be very effective with that time. And that's what that's what I started doing. I just went straight, spent for a couple of months, woke up, would do the questions first, do cumulative questions as I went along, and the fact that we had notes and we had mini quizzes. I personally didn't use the audio notes very much because I'm just not a very auditory person. I'm a visual learner, and I just always read the review notes, always taking quizzes. Because you were right in a lot of your training webinars, you were talking about the fact that we always say that we're busy, but we always find like 4 or 5 hours a day to check our phones, once we add all that time up. And so I just made it a point to just go to my review notes, read that for a few minutes, take a quiz. If I wanted to take a break from work, if I wanted to take a break from actually looking at my review course or doing homework for school, that's what I would do. I would just, mix in a little, like an extra hour or two of studying just using that. And that was the process that I had. One mistake that I had when I first started was I kind of had an attitude of like, I have to get the question right versus why is the question right? And I think that that's what led me to not passing the first time, is just having that. I was so accustomed to trying to get the questions right, not realizing that when you take the exam, the questions are going to be different. They're not going to be the exact same. And the ultimate purpose in studying is understanding why the answers are right. Why, how do you get, how do you get to the process of getting to the right answer? Because once you learn that process and once you learn the why, you can be able to answer the question regardless of how they word it to you. So that was a mistake that I made the first time around, and I fixed it the second time around, still using your methods, but just changing that attitude. And I was able to pass my FAR retake because I took FAR first. Took that December of 2021, didn't pass, retook it a few months later, which is not always the best recommendation, but I was not, just completely honest, I wasn't really the best at managing time when I was in grad school, and I was just kind of taking my time with it. And but I was able to pass that retake that I took a few months later after the semester was over, because I was doing school and studying and working a graduate assistantship, and I waited till after the semester was over to take my FAR retake, and I was able to pass that. Those, once I changed that attitude of like, why is the question right, and applied that to my study methods and study schedule, I was able to pass the rest of them on the first try, with the exception of audit. Had to take that a second time and pass that the second time.
Awesome. Okay. Like you said, there's so many things about this that once you grasp the idea and say it out loud, it just sounds like common sense. But so much of this that you just kind of go into and you either figure it out through trial and error, or somehow it's pointed out to you otherwise. But that distinction of not trying to get the question right per se, but learning the process behind a question type, was that, did you get that from the pro course, or was that just kind of a realization you had in your own studying?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. It was a little bit of what you were trying to get at with the pro course, as well as me using kind of trial and error and realizing that after I took that first exam, I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here when I took that first exam. But that was that moment where I was just like, okay, I need to not necessarily spend like 10 times more time studying, but changing the approach and attitude that I study with.
Yes. Yeah. That's such a big distinction, because I say this a lot, but unfortunately, that's what most people out there, they just view as their only like tool against
Hmm.
these exams. Like just spend more time. But if that time's not strategic, like you can spend 10 hours a day and still you're not really
Hmm.
getting what you need, you know? That
Hmm.
practical level understanding of being able to understand the question types you're going to see.
Still on the same topic, so, trying to get the question right instead of knowing why you got it right. Or did you find yourself answering questions to get them right so that your review course would say, "Oh, you've gotten this percentage correct"? Did you find yourself answering questions just because you wanted to see that you got it right even when you didn't know,
Yeah,
even if you didn't know
yeah.
why? Just trying to, like, make sure I understand that.
Yeah, I think one of the most underrated discouragements in studying is getting a question wrong when you spent a lot of time working out a problem.
Mhm.
Like, especially if it's something in FAR where you have your Excel sheet open and you have this big financial statement problem. Um, it's there was that side of me that was like, I really want to see this right. And
Mhm.
this other side of me that was like, I really need to get through this material. And if I'm getting these questions right, that means I'm doing something right. When
Mm,
that's not
mhm.
necessarily true.
Was that like a mental shift for, and you kind of already talked about this, but seems like
Mhm.
with what you said there, where you're like, you work through it and you still get it wrong and it's super discouraging. I'm guessing that your mind eventually shifted to, it doesn't matter if I get it wrong because I'm just
Mhm.
trying to learn from this. Like, this is my learning material. Did you find that that happened?
Exactly, exactly. I had to just be okay with the fact that, you know what, I'm gonna get some questions wrong and I'm not gonna be able to get things the first time and I may have to rework some things. But the point is, if I get the concepts and if I understand the process to get to the right answer, that's all that matters.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically the idea of kind of like vanity metrics, right? And
Hmm.
this can happen in a lot of different ways. Like one thing that will happen is, someone will say, I got through 200 questions today. And that's good. But did you really learn how to do those 200 types of questions? Or would you have been better off to really nail down the process and the why behind 40 or 50 questions? Like seeing
Hmm.
200 questions in a day sounds good,
Hmm.
but was it actually effective? That's always the question people should be asking themselves,
Right,
am
right.
I gaining the practical ability to answer these types of questions from this study time I spent? And sometimes
Hmm.
that might mean reworking a question. Maybe you've done several and there is just something you're like, okay, this thing keeps getting mentioned and I'm not getting it from the question. So let me look that up in the textbook. And that's a
Hmm.
very different approach or much more effective than, just reading the entire chapter and then going to the questions, kind of like you explained in the beginning, where you can put in all that time, but it still didn't
Hmm.
give you the ability to answer the questions. So
Hmm.
why spend that kind of time up front? It's all
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
process of getting straight down to like what is giving you the ability to answer those questions you'll see on test day.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, so just to go back to the beginning, so you started the study process and taking the exams while you were still in your master's program then?
Correct. Yeah, I started studying for them when I started grad school. Yes, in
Okay.
fall of 2021.
And was that a master's in accounting?
Yeah, yeah. Master. My university was Master of Science in Accounting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's how mine was with the bachelor's. Like, almost all the degrees were bachelor's of science, but then in something else.
Hmm.
Kind of along with that. So I also did all the CPA exams through my master's, but
Hmm.
I was kind of the person pushing, at least one of the people who was pushing a lot of people through that, like encouraging them, we should do it during our masters. Did you find that you were alone in that, or was that kind of a common thing where you were like studying for the exams during your masters?
Yeah, I when I was in school, there was maybe a couple of people that I knew from undergrad who was working on it or finished. Um, but when I was in undergrad, I was in Beta Alpha Psi, and during all of our meetings where people talked about Becker, people talked about Wiley, um, the one thing people always said was get it done as soon as possible. And if you can get it done in grad school, that's the best because you can work your schedule around and you have a little bit more leeway with with your time as opposed to working full time and trying to study. And so there was a lot of encouragement from my department at my university. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to finish all of my exams before starting to work full time. I had to take a couple while working full time. And honestly, I would have chosen studying during grad school over studying working full time any day of the week.
Yeah.
You're in that zone of studying, of sitting down for hours at a time for school. And granted, you study probably differently for the CPA exams. At least that's what we try to encourage with Superfast CPA. But you are like, you're used to your day being split into more chunks. Anyway, I think it's a great time if people can manage it to do it. I found that to be the case as well.
Yeah.
So along those lines, I was going to ask, just, I think you mentioned it, but how did you structure your days to study and go through your master's program? I guess there's that segment, and then once you were working. So kind of describe how you studied or when, like your main session, but also how you use the mini sessions in the app, both during grad school and then when you transitioned to working full time.
Yeah, so when I was in school, I tried to study in the mornings, and I would have those 2 to 2.5 hour sessions of going through the multiple choice questions, reverse engineering, trying to teach myself from the questions and answer explanations. When I was in grad school, I was working as a graduate assistant, and and there was a little bit of flexibility on work hours and stuff like that. So I would go to work. I would occasionally take a bathroom break or something like that, take a lunch break, and look at the review notes and do the quizzes in those little breaks after having the study session, that morning. And then at night, I do my homework for school and then squeeze in maybe an extra 30 minutes of studying for my review course. That's how it looked in grad school. I had about 2 months of just working, and I had one summer class, but for the most part, my summer was very much dedicated to studying. And I was able to knock out reg in about a month and a half, and studied for audit, and failed that the first time, unfortunately. But the way my summer looked was, I would just spend maybe do similar to those like morning sessions that I had in grad school, but spread it out more throughout the day. And yeah, just if I wanted to take a break from the review course, I would go to the super fast notes, the quizzes, because I also think that while it's also helping you, it's also kind of giving yourself a break from looking at your review course and kind of seeing things seeing things in a different way and kind of seeing things in a smaller scale. And so I thought that was really neat. Unfortunately, I at that time in my life, I don't think I had very good structure in the sense of how I divided my time between work, between school, between family, between CPA studying. And I was just kind of doing things as they came. And that's something that I would not recommend to the audience. I would definitely recommend, separating your time, just saying like, this is the time I'm going to spend with CPA studying. This is the time I'm going to spend for myself. This is the time I'm going to spend with my family. That's something that I had to learn once I started working full time, and I'd really encourage the audience to do that when they study for the CPA exam. Is just separate that time between yourself, between your family, between others, and between studying. And I was kind of forced to do that. In when I started working full time, I would study in the morning before work, go to work, squeeze in a little bit more studying at night. Some mornings I could not get up, and so I would just do that study session at night, and that's why I said that I would choose studying in grad school versus studying working full time any day of the week, because it's the worst feeling in the world when you work all day and then go home and study.
Yeah. Yeah. But on the other hand, you saying that I wasn't great at managing my time, but you still passed your exams and got done. The time you were putting in was working. There's a lot of people out there that are studying 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day and still not passing, you know? So I guess it's more a testament to just the time you do spend. If you're doing the right things, you know, it's going to pay off. I was wondering, could you just give an example of a bad example of what do you mean specifically by not managing your time great or not separating out the specific things? Like, what do you mean specifically by that?
Yeah, I would just say not having consistency with the times that I studied,
Okay.
or yeah, I mean, there would be more some days where I would study in the morning, but then there would be some days that I couldn't wake up and I would study at night, and I would fight to stay awake studying at night. And also, just, there would be some days where I didn't work and I was able to study all day, but then there are some days when I was able to study maybe just a couple hours. And I think looking back, I would have liked to have had a little bit more consistency, just for my own sake and my own
Yeah.
mental health. But
Hmm.
but yeah, that's something that I would encourage the audience as well.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is much easier to, I guess, stick to a routine when it is a literal routine, I guess, is basically what you're saying. That's kind of the only thing that studying while working full time does for you, I guess. I mean, it's harder, but you're kind of forced to either do it before work or after work. And
Mhm.
after work, there's so many things and obstacles you're fighting to have effective study sessions if you're doing it at night versus the morning. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking about that, that reminded me of a routine that I had for a while I was studying. Maybe it's a little embarrassing, but during so at one point I was working part time, doing school full time, and then studying for CPA. And so I would go into work early in the morning, study, and then work, and then go to school. And at work, to save time, every morning I would eat like a hot pocket for breakfast and a Mountain Dew, and just like, I don't know, but it was like every day, like the same thing, like the
Yeah.
same routine every day. Looking back, I'm like, that was probably really unhealthy. But anyway, like you definitely like creating, and Nate has had episodes about this, creating these routines where you do the same thing. You know, you drink your favorite drink while you're studying, you go to the same spot, you study at the same time. Like all these things will, it helps you be more in the zone. And yeah, along with what you were saying, the consistency also really helps. Anyway, yeah, that just reminded me of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, it is a big thing though, because if every little part of your morning is like a open-ended decision you have to make, like, okay, well, no plan. What am I going to make? Let me look. What stuff do I have? Maybe today's oatmeal. And then, well, no, I've got to like make myself eggs because I don't have anything else. If all that stuff's just decided beforehand, that's another just way of making time in the morning is, you know, most people kind of just go through their morning routine, meaning getting ready for work. And it's like an hour to just kind of slowly go through the different steps. But if you just kind of systemize that, and you know that you're just grabbing the hot pocket and your mountain hot pocket Mountain Dew, like, yeah, I mean, you can survive anything for 6 months though. I mean, you're fine, and you
I
passed.
should have
So
done that, honestly.
yeah,
That's
it's
that's a
probably. I mean,
new,
it sounds good.
it's not a new part of the pro course. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, breakfast, hot pocket, and Mountain Dew. Yeah, yeah. I basically mentioned this book somehow on every episode, but the Atomic Habits book, just reducing friction, or even down to like the choices you have to make to get to your key activity for the day. Yeah, so but that's a good example. You just removed all the decision making around what to eat for breakfast and how much time it takes by just making it the same every day. You can do that with your bedtime, your night routine, when you wake up in the morning, like what time you're sitting down. And it sounds like a lot of work, but it just solves so many problems. Were there any hobbies or like exercising, just anything that you made it a point to still do throughout the process just because it was something you enjoyed doing?
Yeah, I always tried to make time to hang out with friends that I made, back in college and continued to make in grad school. I still tried to make time for them. Unfortunately, I kind of neglected working out, which is not something I would recommend to any studiers out there. Um, but I was able to make time for friends. I was able to make time for my church. I was able to make time for my family. Um, made time to eat because that's important. I was able to. Um, it was a little bit difficult, but I was able to fit in those things better than if I didn't employ these methods.
Yeah, right. Because if your main session's done in the morning and then you make up anywhere from like 1 to 3 hours with the mini sessions idea, by the time you're done with work, you've put in 3, 4, maybe even 5, like really high quality hours without having to find 5 dedicated hours, which is extremely hard to do when you're already busy with everything else. And so,
Right,
yeah, it makes
right.
it more flexible. It's easier mentally. It's easier, like behaviorally, to actually do it each day. Um, I just think, yeah, it just makes it a lot easier. And then, like you said, you still are able to work around those important things. Whereas if you hadn't been studying in the mornings and you go to work all day or school all day, then really your only time to study is at night. And of course, then you're either choosing between studying or doing normal stuff. And you're only going to study like half the time. Yeah.
Right, right.
Not to get into it specifically for religion. So you mentioned church, was there a day of the week where the day was a lot more filled up with family and those kinds of activities? Were you able to still fit in mini sessions and study sessions on those maybe busier days? How did you make that fit?
If I understand correctly, are you basically just saying, with all of those extracurricular activities that I was
Yeah.
doing, how was I able to kind of fit that into my
Yeah.
schedule?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I had, you know, with my church and with my activities that I was doing, I was there every Saturday night, every Sunday morning. And then I was in a Christian organization in college that had events on Thursday night. And I knew, from the beginning of the week that those were the nights, then those
Yeah.
were the mornings that I was going to be occupied. And so it was pretty easy to work around that because at that point, like, it was very rare that something unexpected came up. And then, yeah, if I wanted to, step away for 10 minutes in those events and like take a mini quiz, I could do that.
Yeah. Since you already knew those things were happening, you just adjusted accordingly and it all worked out fine.
Exactly. Exactly.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for that. I would say the majority of the time, a lot of things are planned ahead of time. Life events and things with family and friends and whatnot. Of course, there's going to be times where it's like really is spur of the moment. Oh wow, I wasn't expecting that. But a lot of the time, there are ways to see things coming and make the necessary adjustments to still make sure that your studying is happening. And I think that's a valuable lesson, a valuable skill to implement that you just mentioned it there. So yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Your structure allows flexibility or just being disciplined to, again, there's very, very few real distractions from like 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning, So it's just so much easier to do it then. It's in the history books for the day. Nothing can ruin it. And then you're free to work around important things or things that you just want to do. Doesn't even have to be important. So on the weekends, would you try to do the same thing, kind of hit the main session in the morning before the weekend events started? Or how'd you structure studying on the weekends?
Yeah, so Saturdays I almost always went to a coffee shop and tried to spend most of the day just knocking out as many questions and in the review course as I could, and taking notes and doing all that. I was able to kind of do those morning sessions that I usually do, but just expand it a little bit more before I had to go to church on Saturday nights. So yeah.
Yep.
So this kind of goes along with it, because usually sims are part of what we recommend for the weekend studying. What was your strategy with the sims? Like, were you only doing those on the weekends during those extended sessions, or did you include those during the week, or not really much at all? How did those look?
Yeah, so there would be a couple of times with each exam that I practiced where I would try to do a few sims in the middle of the study process, but for the most part, I waited kind of till the end where I did the review process, like the final review, to practice some simulations. Just like Nate, how you were saying in your pro course, and the fact of like it's important to understand how they're structured and to have kind of a process of answering those sims, but not to spend so much time trying to get every sim right in your review course, because the exam is going to be completely different. So just having an understanding of what a sim looks like, and having like a game plan essentially of how you're gonna break it apart, take the exhibits, read through it, and especially Nate, like you were saying, the best advice that you could give with that is try to get the multiple choice questions done as soon as you can, so you can have the most time on the sims, because the sims are essentially just, taking these concepts and taking these processes that you learned and just making it bigger, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of
Yeah.
my process with that.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people say that, kind of just waiting until the last week or so to really, and I kind of like that idea, thinking about that. I think it's
That's
valuable
what
to
I
see
did.
some of the sims topic by topic as you go, just to see like, okay, there's all these lease MCQs, but how does this show up as far as sims? But then kind of doing a deep dive on the sims like the last week or so before the exam. That's how you did that too, Logan?
Yeah, that's what I did. My 2-week final review, that's when I started doing sims every day. But I didn't do them beforehand, except for with audit. But audit was my first exam, so I was kind of like figuring myself out.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my attitude with Sims were essentially, if I know the concepts and I know the process to answer a multiple choice question, I'm probably going to know the process to answer a sim. So it would just be a matter of having an idea of what they look like.
Yeah. And like you said, half the battle with the sims is when you open one, you don't really get specific instructions for each sim. There is this like 10-minute exercise you have to kind of go through to open the different exhibits and kind of just assimilate all of it. Like, okay, what is going on here? And if you're rushed for time and you can't really go through that process, that's when like time management can make someone who's otherwise really prepared and would pass otherwise, it can, and it does cause people to fail, just the time management piece. So that is a big thing. And like by far the simplest version of it is you just get really good at answering MCQs, which just comes through practice throughout the study process. And then on test day, it kind of takes care of itself. And then you have more than enough time to do that with the sims, like open each packet. Okay, this is the hardest one by far. Let me do these easier ones first. Now I know I have 20 minutes that I have to submit this hard one. Anyways, all the time management stuff.
Yeah.
So one question was, when you got your first passing score, was that kind of the validation of my study process is working? Or did you kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel like switching from, your first few weeks to these methods, did you
Mm-hmm.
feel like, okay, this is definitely working better? And then passing your first section was, I don't know, just when did you feel like it was really clicking and your study process was working well?
Exactly that. When I found out, when I got that first passing score, and then kind of solidifying that with the second passing score, because I was able to pass that second exam in less time.
Okay.
So yeah, just I would say that getting those first couple of passing scores is that
Mm.
idea that like, yeah, what I'm doing is probably right. What's probably effective.
Yeah. Awesome.
You felt like it was effective, but were there any moments during your study process, whether that was like busy season or family or whatever that was, that kind of like slowed you down or made it more difficult? Anything kind of like that?
Yeah, I would say when I started working full time, it was a very interesting time in my life where I have a new job in a new city, where I don't really know a lot of people, and I have to study, and it was a lot of life changes, and figuring out how to study with all of these life changes was a little difficult. But I kind of had to accept the fact that, you know what, maybe in the first couple of months that I'm here, I might not be able to socialize as much. Um, but I was able to, make time to study, make it be effective. Um, and it just kind of took a little getting used to with all of the life changes happening at the same time.
Yeah.
How long was that? I mean, do you feel like to just get adjusted to what you're talking about, working full time and figuring out how to still study, was that like a few weeks or?
Yeah, it took a few weeks. Yeah, it just took a little getting used to. I mean, before I started working full time, I was not very much a morning person, and I'm still not a very good morning person. But I slowly had to get better when I
Gotcha.
was studying and working full time. Yeah.
I like asking people this just for everyone that's going to hear this. What
Hmm.
specifically did you have to eventually kind of nail down, like, okay, I have to have put my phone down by this time so I'm asleep by this time so I can get up by this time? What like
Hmm.
specific routine did you have to kind of plan to make that work?
Yeah. I would say I would say the biggest thing for me was just having to say no to people, which is not something I want to do, but
Hmm.
I kind of had to do sometimes. Because and it's hard for me because I'm a huge people pleaser, and I don't want to, if I have the opportunity to spend time with somebody or hang out with somebody, or hang out with my family, or hang out with a friend, or just go out for dinner one night. There were times when I wasn't able to do that, and
Hmm.
but I had to be okay with that for just a couple of months. And I would say that's hard because I have a huge fear of missing out, and yeah, and and I had to be okay with that when I was studying for this, knowing that like, at a certain point this is going to be done and I'm going to have all the time in the world to do these fun things. To the
Yeah.
most extent, obviously. Obviously I still was able to do some fun stuff while I was studying, but to the most extent.
How did anybody understand what you were going through? Like, did you have anybody that had been through a similar thing, or was everybody kind of just like, okay, I guess we'll see? Like, how were people's reactions to that?
I wish I could say yes, but nobody close to me in my life has taken the CPA exam outside of my dad, who tried. But but yeah, I mean, for the most part, people who are close to me didn't really understand the magnitude of, how big this exam is, how hard this
Hmm.
exam is, and how much of your energy has to go to this. So they were kind of like, okay, Josh has to study, kind of attitude. But and I mean, they understood and they respected
Yeah.
it, but I don't think anybody really understood to the fullest extent, like, how, what I was really getting myself into.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned, so you were in one city for your master's and you like got hired in a different city. So you were just moving on your own to a brand new city as you started your first like
Mm-hmm.
big public accounting job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
big adjustment. Yeah.
And what do you work in? And do you work in tax or audit or what?
Yeah, I don't work for that firm anymore, but but I did work in audit at the time, and I
Okay.
still work in audit, but I work for state audit for state government.
Okay. Okay. Quite different.
Mhm.
Okay. So, you started all this in your master's and everything, and now you're not working in public accounting specifically.
Mhm.
What was your driving motivation to become a CPA? Like, was it,
Mhm.
you know, I know at first I did it because everybody said I should become a CPA, but then I kind of learned more as time went on. Like, how did that go?
So that story actually has different phases. So when I was in college, through Beta Alpha Psi, through a lot of different recruiters and everything, they were all saying that like, yeah, get your CPA. It's going to be open up great opportunities for you. Just it had been kind of encouraged all throughout college, and so I had decided pretty early on that that's something that I want to do because the opportunity and the money and everything that kind of comes at the end of it, because everything that people tells you when they promote it. And that was kind of that driving force. I wanted it to be a good long term benefit for me in my career. When I got into it, when I got into studying for it, I feel like everybody has that moment where they're like, when they start studying and they're like, is this even something I really want? Is it worth it? Is it worth putting all this time and energy studying for it? And yeah, I still had to remind myself the long-term benefits of it career-wise, but I also had to think to myself, I want to prove to myself that I can do this. I want to be proud of this, and I want it to be an encouragement to other people. And so when you combine those two elements, like that's what kept me going, and that's why I essentially wanted to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone knows that you're going to make more money and, get promotions faster. And at the beginning, that seems like all the motivating reasons. But like you said, once you get into it and you realize what a daily mental battle it is, quickly
Mm-hmm.
it becomes just kind of like a battle with yourself, really. Basically, how
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, like, can
Mm-hmm.
I overcome this thing that requires, discipline, waking up at the same time, hours of focused study for months on end? Like, there's a lot that goes into it. It's very different than
Mm-hmm.
college, where you kind of get walked through the material by showing up to class. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just very different. And it's just interesting that that's what everyone goes through. You start out with all the
Mm-hmm.
career oriented benefits, but it quickly becomes this thing where it's kind of just the man in the mirror type thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. What'd you do for like note taking and or flashcards? How much
Yeah.
of that did you use, or what was your process for that?
Yeah, so I did what you recommended in the pro course, going through the questions, um, taking the important topics that you consistently see coming up, as well as the questions that you get wrong, and making notes for it. I didn't use flashcards, but I used just a binder and wrote it like a notebook,
Mm-hmm.
and because that's just how I've always taken notes. Um, and I kind of did it Cornell note style, where it was like, I have a T, and then, I have a question or, something here, and then the answer on the right side with, explanations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, try to read that throughout the study process. And then on my review week, just reread those notes over and over again on top of your review notes. I just took notes in my binder and on the important stuff and questions that I was getting wrong, and reviewed that on
Gotcha.
Okay.
the final week. I will say this was one mistake I made when I was studying for audit. It is possible to take too much notes because
Yeah.
I think at a certain point I was just trying to write down everything that I didn't really understand the process, I mean, in an audit, you really have to understand the audit process and risk assessment and all that, and um, and I think at a certain point I was writing too many notes and not understanding the process, like comprehending it,
Hmm.
and so yeah, that is one thing that I would say is like I definitely take notes, but don't try to write down everything. There should be a balance of like understanding processes, understanding concepts, and writing things down if you're continuously getting it wrong or
Hmm.
if it's something really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the key there is, and we talk about this sometimes, is putting it in your own words. Like if you're
Hmm.
just like writing down the process word for word instead of sitting there and walking yourself through the process and like maybe writing it down in a way that makes sense to you. Yeah, there's that distinction there of making it
Hmm.
work for you instead of just, just putting it on the page because you hope that you'll remember it later kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, getting clear on the what and why. That always helped
Hmm.
me a ton. Like what is actually going on here? Like what's the substance of this foreign currency
Hmm.
translation questions? That's where it would
Hmm.
really help. Like what is the substance of this transaction? Like what's really going on here? It's easy to
Hmm.
just get lost in like the specifics of the words, the accounting jargon,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and then stepping back and just thinking like, okay, what does this actually mean? That's a very helpful, I guess, thought exercise or way of trying to break things down. Like what's really going on here?
Hmm. Right.
Ah,
Exactly.
I had a question in there somewhere. Well, another question would be, was there any other study methods or things that really helped you that we haven't covered or talked about?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered all the bases. Ultimately, it's just the biggest game changer was what you talked about, and like you want to spend the majority of your time studying, doing the things that you're going to do on test day. And
Mhm.
what you're going to do on test day is answer questions and not be able to watch a lecture or read a chapter.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I just think that working backwards from answer explanations that you get from the questions is not really something that gets encouraged a lot, just in general. But that was the most effective for me is just kind of working backwards, reverse engineering, and just approaching the questions and approaching the answer explanations and really wrestling with these answer explanations and working problems over until I understood the process, until it clicked, you know?
Hmm.
I think that when something clicks, when you're approaching the questions first and approaching the answer explanations first, I feel like that is so much more effective than something clicking when you're watching a lecture because you don't even know if that's going to
Mhm.
come on the question, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And okay, so the way that I like to describe that is if you just hear someone speaking a foreign language, it just
Mhm.
doesn't mean anything to your brain. All right. You just
Mhm.
no hooks or you just don't have any context as to what's being said. It just doesn't mean anything. And so
Right.
you can watch someone talk for 20 minutes in a different language, but you're not going to get
Mhm.
anything out of that. But if you were like in a language class and you had this list of kind of words that you're listening for, or if you just have some context before you watch this 20-minute training on, you know, how to say greetings in German or whatever, it will
Mhm.
make a lot more sense. And so going through the questions first kind of gives you these, you know, you have some pieces to work with. Like I kind of get this type of question, but this keeps getting mentioned. Then if you go and look for that information in either the video or the textbook, you have context of what you're looking for, and it will
Mhm.
make sense the first time. And it's more interesting, if you could
Mhm.
say that about CPA study. Just having
Mhm.
a question in your mind first of, okay, what is this? Like, what is the cost method for treasury stock transactions
Mhm.
or whatever. If you have actual questions, then you're more engaged in general versus just pressing play from the beginning and getting 30 minutes of information dumped on you. Okay, what would be your top 2 or 3 tips to people that are maybe still struggling with the study process?
Yeah, first thing is first, always, and I say this from my own mistakes, have a routine, pick a day and time that you want to study, and 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 uh and like you were saying, have your favorite drink, have your favorite food, bring that in and just have a routine, stick with it, give all your time and energy in that little block that you study, and make the most of that time. Secondly is reverse engineer the process, and if you fail an exam, don't be discouraged, because sometimes you may just have to tweak a study method. So just reverse engineer the process, play around with it, see figure out what works for you. And I would never recommend that if somebody fails an exam to do the exact same thing. Try to tweak something, and because that's typically all that is needed to pass, is just one small change in your study method, whether it's spending more time practicing questions, spending less time taking notes, things like that. And the third step, the third recommendation would be, on test day, try to do as little as possible, and don't stress yourself out too much. Read through, do one last skim through of the notes, I guess. I personally, that's what I did on the day of. I didn't try to do any heavy studying or anything the day of. I went into the last day knowing that I did everything I could. I'm just going to look at this one more time so I could have everything in my head at one time. And my routine before I took every exam was, I would look at those notes in my car before I went into the testing center, and say a quick prayer, and then, like, I had some pump up music. I listened to "Welcome to the Jungle" by Guns N' Roses, and that would be my pump up song every time I walked into the testing center. For every exam that I passed, I wore the same shirt and the same jeans. So, and the one time I changed that, I didn't pass. So I don't know if anybody here is superstitious, but that may help you.
That's funny. Didn't you, Logan? Didn't you do that? You wore a Metallica
I wore the same shirt to every exam
right?
too. Yeah. What was it, like a specific shirt, like, or was just like, did it have like a logo on it or something, or
It was a
favorite shirt?
black raglan shirt. I think that's what you call it. It's one of those shirts that's like, it has the little tight cuffs at the end of the short sleeve.
Okay.
It was like a black t-shirt with the orange cuffs on the sleeves, and wasn't even that, great of a shirt, but it helped me pass every
Yeah,
exam.
lucky shit.
Yeah.
I can't. There was someone
shirt.
on one of these interviews said that they would. I swear they said they would drink a beer. It can't be the day of. That would be insane. They would drink.
No.
Maybe it was the night before. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But they would.
I think you're right. Like, they had
that
like a
was-
barbecue and something like that before.
Maybe it
Yeah.
was the night before. They would always have like a meet up with their friends and have a drink the night before. And I mean, whatever. If you're like going in and passing, like, do whatever you want. I mean, whatever your routine is. All right,
Yeah,
Josh. Well, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, for me it was caffeine. I just also drink a lot of caffeine the morning of.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I appreciate you doing the interview. That was really helpful. Just going to be just another really good episode. You shared a lot of really good tips. I'm glad you emailed me back in April. I mean, it's been a while. I guess I forgot to ask, what has it been like being done? Like you mentioned, it's look forward to being done, but what is it like now that you are actually done?
Oh, it was the best feeling in the world, honestly. Just, being done and thinking about, when I had found out that I passed my last exam the first day of busy season at my old job, and I didn't really get a chance to, like, embrace or celebrate, but I loved the fact that, like, the only thing I told people at work and in life was just, I don't have to study anymore. This feels so
Yeah.
weird. I don't have to study
Right.
anymore. Like, it was just it's amazing feeling. And, but even more so, it was just an amazing feeling of like, I stuck with it and I was able to accomplish this and I didn't give up. And, as much as the professional benefits are great, it's more so just like the personal, self-esteem of like, you did this when you didn't have to, and you kept going when you could have quit. So it was just, though all of those feelings were just like, it made it all worth it in the end.
Absolutely.
That's how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we won't take up any more of your time, but I appreciate you doing the call, and I'm glad you found us. I'm glad it made a difference, and congrats on being done.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, and thank you, Nate, for all that you do and for introducing me to this.
Yep. Yep. The best compliment I can get is that it actually helps someone pass. So love to hear it.
All right, that was the interview with Josh. I'm sure you found it helpful. I thought it was a great interview. Again, I really liked his comment about changing his mindset to be okay with missing questions. And I also love that he was able to maintain some of his social life, family, friends, even church. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss out on if they are spending all day studying. Make sure to like and leave a comment on the YouTube video or leave a rating in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to share this podcast with anybody you know who is going through the CPA exams. This podcast is the best free resource out there for CPA exam candidates. Thanks for listening or watching, and I'll see you in the next video.